Quite clearly, a huge upside surprise for the jobs report in America. An administration looking to do more. Kevin Hassett, your friend and colleague, talked about getting everyone back into the labour force who lost their job. The president talked about more stimulus. Talk to me about time. How big and how quickly can we get the next package through and through Congress fast?
Well, look, I don't know about the get Congress fast part. We have taken some time off from legislation, even though we're talking to both parties. Kevin Hassett and I have done bipartisan conference calls, and there's always conversations among our leaders and their leaders. But we wanted to assess the economic story and see what the original $3 trillion package was going to do for the economy, and, of course, let the Federal Reserve develop and evolve its various lending facilities. So the point, Jonathan, is we will come back, I reckon, after July 4th, and we'll have a good discussion. We need policies that will help long-term economic growth. I think the rescue package was enormously helpful. I think the payroll protection program probably saved 50 million or more jobs, $510 billion. You know, the story in today's numbers, as you've probably covered, is that temporary layoffs have gone back to work, roughly 3 million. And that is, I think, partly at least a direct function of the PPP program and, of course, the tax rebates and the unemployment help. So there you have it. I don't want to rush into anything. Neither does the president. Several times today he mentioned that we would have bipartisan talks. He's still sticking to the payroll tax holiday for the workforce, which I think is a terrific idea. And we're looking at a number of pro-growth options inside the administration right now.
Larry, let's talk about the enhanced unemployment benefits. They expire next month. There was some concern that maybe they would discourage people going back into the workforce. Quite clearly, if this labour market report today is any guide, that is not what's happening. What's the White House's position on extending those enhanced unemployment benefits?
We haven't made a final decision yet, so I can't get ahead of that curve. I will say there's a lot of momentum to reform the $600 plus up. There are probably better ways to do it, to get around the disincentive problem. You're quite right. It didn't show up today, but it's early, and I'm concerned about that. And we may reward the workforce for going back to work. We're looking at a number of options on that score. You know, bear in mind, Jonathan, I don't think today's numbers was a one-time thing. I mean, the business openings by May 12th, the survey week, was less than 50% small business. But the Chamber of Commerce down here is estimating now in early June, nearly 80% of small businesses have reopened. So that means more and more people who were furloughed or temporarily laid off will get back into the labor force in June and July and so forth. And as you know, there have been a lot of green shoots popping up, whether it's the Apple mobility, the driving, the big surge in housing purchase applications, and other indicators. So I think the economy, the contraction probably troughed in mid-April. It was quick, it was hard, it was heartbreaking with hardship, but I think we're going to have a very sharp rebound, and you'll see it in the second half of the year, probably with about 20% economic growth.
Larry, I hope we see some serious growth. I don't want to get into the business of forecast with you because, as we've seen this morning, this market, this jobs market, this economy can make people look pretty stupid pretty quickly. I do want to understand from you guideposts. How will you know that you've done enough on fiscal stimulus in the next month? What are you going to be looking for specifically to tell you whether you need to do more or whether you can pause?
Well, look, we're just going to look at the general trends. That's what we do. We try to track every number imaginable, particularly the so-called high-frequency leading indicators. I mean, for example, I'm not going to hang my hat on this, but I'm going to say one. The Apple Mobility Index is now widely used on Wall Street. That's an indicator of people getting out and traveling, right? They're looking for directions. Most of it's driving. So that's something we might not have thought about before this pandemic problem, but now we're looking at it. I'm still looking at traditional indicators like mortgage applications or new business startups, both of which are rising sharply. And then the traditional indicators, of course, on jobs, income, sales, and so forth. So we're going to try to look at the whole panoply of numbers to get a feel, for what's working and maybe where the trouble spots are.
Larry, of course, when you and I talk, we talk about the aggregate numbers, and I think we have to spend a little bit more time talking about the disparity. The president called this a really big jobs report. Of course, it is. He said this is better than a V. This is a rocket ship. He also said this is a tribute to equality on a day when black unemployment actually climbed, on a week where there's been some real social unrest. And I just wonder, Larry, whether that speaks to the tone deafness that some people are complaining about at the moment. Don't we have to appreciate the disparity behind the headline numbers just a little bit more, Larry?
Well, look, the president, I was there. The president didn't denigrate that thought. His answer to that question, which I think was a cheeky question, frankly, was growth and opportunity. And look, you go back to January and February of this year. It seems like decades ago, but it was only a few months. National unemployment around 3.5%, and every single minority unemployment indicator, African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, the whole panoply, they were rock bottom, record lows. That's what growth and that's what opportunity does. That's what incentives do. And we've added to that substantially with direct aid into neighborhoods and the opportunity zones packages. And look, I think you can look forward to more tax cuts, more deregulation, and more trade deals that are reciprocal and fair that will spark an export boom. So I'm not one that's going to target individual groups. I think if the overall economy grows, a rising tide will lift all boats. And I think that was proven by Trump policies in recent years and even recent months before the pandemic. Go back and look, run your fingernail down those unemployment rates. You'll see record lows across the board. So that's the goal. The goal is to help everybody. Help everybody.
Larry, we've talked about those numbers in the past. I've allowed you to highlight them many times. You've had great success in those particular areas. I am concerned, though, we're not going to help particular groups. Why wouldn't we, if they've been disproportionately hit by what we've seen play out over the last several months?
Well, let's, I tell you what, the bottom of this contraction was, I think, mid-April. Most economists are coming around to that view. So these job numbers came a few weeks later. So I think, Jonathan, you've got to calculate and examine and assess the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months, and then we'll take a look at the story. These things cannot be done overnight. There's no question that the lower wages, the lower income folks were the first to lose their job. I absolutely grant that. That is true. It's also the case, however, if you go back a few months when the economy was booming, that it was precisely the lower wage groups that had the highest, fastest growth in wages and income. So that's an example of how a growing economy and growing opportunities will help everybody. So I'm just saying on these points, let's not rush to judgment. This is the first genuine major piece of good news. There's a lot more coming, and we will examine everything. Look, I spent my life as a civil rights Republican, Jonathan, and an equal opportunity Republican.
I understand.
I was a protege of Ronald Reagan and Jack Kemp many years ago, so I understand the issue. I'm just saying that a rising tide will lift all boats, and meanwhile, we will provide extra help where it is needed. I mean, have a look at the program for opportunity zones. It's a widespread investment program with tax incentives, with education incentives, with health care incentives. That's something that Secretary Ben Carson and Senator Tim Scott helped design with the president. That's a program that should get more attention and visibility.
Larry, I would never question your compassion. You know that. You've always displayed great compassion on this programme, on this network, and I'll continue to give you the opportunity to talk about these subjects. They're trying to pull you away. And as always, you and I could talk together forever. So let's just get one final question in on trade. The president said at the end of April that he could do a lot when it came to responding to China and give them the consequences that he thinks they deserve. Have we seen the fullness of America's response in the last couple of weeks, or is there more still to come?
My suspicion is more is still to come. China will be held accountable. We don't have enough time to go through the litany, but with respect to the pandemic, with respect to what they're doing in Hong Kong and other problems. They completely lack transparency, including investor transparency. So I don't know. We may see more actions there. I will say this, though. We are, Jonathan, we are engaging with them on the Phase 1 trade deal. We are. So we'll leave it at that.